Right. Hello and welcome back. This is Frantz Kantor here, cartoonist, illustrator, toon talker. And I am going to do another drawing today. Who we're going to draw? We're going to draw Professor Julius Sumner Miller. So if you don't know who Professor Julius Sumner Miller is, let me go back to my gallery. This is him. This is the actual photograph that I'm going to be trying to work from. He's a very influential person on a lot of people growing up in the 60s and 70s, of course. He did Cadbury commercials as well. But he posed this question, why is it so? Which asks how, basically poses a fun way of looking at the world. Primarily concerned with physics and scientific question, but obviously is applicable to a lot of areas of life. So he was a great teacher and had a very he had a long career. He actually died at the age of 77. He was born in 1909. And in the early days, in the 60s, of course, he had these wonderful, he put out some records for Disney and lecture series, Great Men of Science. So these were unique because they were like practical expressions of physics, explanations that were performed live on camera. And the ABC, of course, took him up in the 60s and put out a whole bunch of lecture series and things, of which he became very popular with, definitely in Australia. So he's a great man. We do not teach physics, nor do we teach students. This is an actual quote. What we do, if we are successful, is to stir interest in the matter at hand, awaken enthusiasm for it, arouse a curiosity, kindle a feeling, fire up the imagination. And he certainly did that. So he was a very sort of gruff, gravelly type of character. Just looked the part. He looked like a crazy scientist guy. Had these bushy eyebrows and crazy hair. And was always very passionate about, that's the thing, isn't it? Passionate about physics and about science. So the inquiring mind. And of course he was an inspiration, I guess, for this guy, which is from Back to the Future. This is Doc. So I think I might get actually losing power on this machine. I hope not. I think should be okay. I won't move it around very much. I think maybe the cable's loose. Alright, so what I've done is I've done a thumbnail sketch to try to work out something distinctive, and as I said to you before, the photograph that I'm working from, there's not a lot of 3/4 views or side views of him. That's not a very typical expression. It's more sort of, I don't know, looking back on his life type of thing. But it's interesting with, the details that this great photograph has got. His eyebrows, the wrinkles, the hair, the side levers, etc. How high or how the hair looks at the back. So these are things that are you're able to sort of inform your decision on the caricature. So obviously you've got this feature, this sort of koala-like features of this hair on either side. That's probably another reason why it was so famous in Australia, because it kind of looked like a grumpy koala bear. So let's try to do him some justice here. I've got him, he's usually looking with a head down and looking through these brows. There's a lot of lines there which we'll talk about in a second. what I've actually done was try to get this thumbnail onto the grey paper so that we can get a kind of a head start. I think I've thrown out a little bit of the proportions. You know what, I might just try to rub that out and start the eyes again, because the thing with caricature is it's like an invitation to play, but it's an invitation to play under different rules. So in other words, you're invited not to use normal rules of proportion and symmetry and a whole bunch of things. Even perspective you can start to muck around with. But the main thing with caricature is you're messing with proportion, okay? So you're having fun with scale, having fun with the size of things. And, you know, very much in the spirit of Julius Sumner Miller himself. So it's just an invitation to have fun. So I think what I might try to do is push that a little bit more. So just to have an element of more fun with the size of things and the shape of things. I think that might be the way to do this. So it's important to rely on things, you know, your gut feeling of how things should be related, not on, with caricature at least, not on the actual size and perspective of elements of the face. So the likeness is quite a complex series of relationships between forms, and the complex nature of this relationship between forms, and I'm talking about this mask area, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, right? If you can kind of think of this T-zone mask, like a wrestling mask from Mexico. So this is a relationship of elements, and they have a sort of a dialogue together. They speak to each other. They have cause and effect, right? Now, scale, proportion, size, proportion, scale is one of the things that you obviously exaggerate in a caricature. You see all the time: big heads, little body, big ears, you know, big elements, hair, the nose, eyebrows, things like that. These are things that you can try to pick on as significant elements to tell a visual story. So they're sort of like, if you think of, I'll give you another can't even speak English, another analogy here. This is sort of a story. I'm telling a story with a pencil, okay? So these are important elements in the story. The main characters in the story are, you know, the general story is Julius Sumner Miller, but the main characters are the nose, the eyebrows, and the eyes, and the mouth, and the concert, or the relationships, or the adventures that each of these elements have in the story. So that's something to be considered. Right, so as Sumner Miller proposed that we do in our lives, is to ask questions and to think about things. Don't take anything for granted. He had a great saying, which was this: he doesn't believe in knowledge. What he believes in, very, very passionately, is understanding. So knowing something is different from understanding how it works. And that is very applicable to this because we know what he looks like, right? What I'm trying to do with the caricature is to really get below the surface and to sort of understand Julius Sumner Miller by doing a caricature, because it's sort of like an in-depth analysis or an experiment, if you will, in a very, very fun activity. So he used to show us science, right? And try to motivate us and get us excited about science, as excited as he was by these activities. And yes, they were very theatrical, and he would pepper them with you know, dad jokes and things, like very, very corny jokes. But occasionally, you know, the jokes were very clever. He had like a diagram of how much you hate him over time, because, you know, a lot of the gags, it was a gag, but a lot of the questions were sort of intended to make you assume the wrong outcome, which is interesting because it's sort of like booby traps. But we see that all the time. It's very entertaining. We see it on QI, etc. Yeah, so sort of scientific booby traps in a way, because, you know, again, it's bumping up against understanding and knowledge. So we know things happen in a certain way because, you know, that's what we expect. But always with life, and indeed with science, and indeed with caricature or art, expect the unexpected. You can see what I'm trying to do here. Why is it so? I'm trying to line up, like Newton's law, I'm trying to line up these elements here so that they have a respect for one another, the left and the right eye, in terms of perspective. So there's a perspective acting on the features, on the forms, which determine, I won't go into the science of it, but basically things have a linear relationship, right? A lot of features. Not exclusively. It's wrong to assume that everybody is symmetrical or has linear features, but, you know, generally there is a relationship which helps us to capture certain aspects. Oh, I haven't got enough. You know what? Haven't got enough wrinkles. Also, that wrinkle, you can tell, is not in perspective. So, you know, perspective is a very interesting observation of life. It gives us spatial information. It also gives us physical, like solid information, rotation, tilt and awe, etc. So, right, I think we can try to get into some. I'm using a brown pencil and a black pencil and a white pencil, and I'm doing this in reference to a great thinker, Leonardo da Vinci, who used a lot of point media, a lot of pens and ink, etc., and a lot of pencils. The pencil work, a lot of it hasn't. It's not really been on display. Hasn't survived, I guess. But popular at the time was the use of a red chalk, sort of an earthy colour, black charcoal, and white chalk. And of course you wouldn't use white chalk on white paper. And you're wrong in assuming that they didn't have white paper. They did. They used to bleach paper. Wasn't that popular. Was very unpopular with a lot of the industries because they used to pump the bleach that they used to use bleach the paper into the canals, which poisoned the fish, which they didn't like. But this sort of concept of drawing with color pencils as opposed to graphite. Graphite is a fairly new invention, and we love graphite because it's everywhere. You can pick up a pencil, put it in your pocket, draw on some white paper, etc. And the thing about graphite is, with white paper, you've got to build up the tone. With toned paper, it's meeting you halfway. So a lot of the paper in Leonardo's day were off-white, and some of them even, like craft paper. That was the sort of colored paper that they used a lot. Not pastel paper that we have today, but sort of off-white paper. Paper that's dark enough for chalk to show up on. And this whole technique was, again, not reinvented, but reinvigorated, I guess, by Ingres during the French Revolution, with the rise of neoclassicism. So it's never really gone away. And if you look at cave paintings in France, for example, you'll see the use of these colors on the tone of the rock itself, which is an interesting concept. There's a whole lecture on that, which I'm going to one day deliver, my theory on cave paintings and how, not Aboriginal cave paintings, because I don't presume to know enough about that, but certainly the European cave paintings, on how and why they are so significant. And how were they achieved? How were they done? Why were they done? Anyway, so he's a very, very interesting guy, this Julius Sumner Miller. So growing up, you obviously watch him accidentally, because you don't want to learn anything on purpose, do you? So you kind of watch the ABC, by accident, and he was very entertaining, incredibly entertaining, and made you like or love the subject of science, which is that is quite a feat, isn't it? Without dinosaurs or space, science fiction, whatever, to actually like physics, to be excited by it. That was his whole motivation, his passion for the practical use of, the practical demonstration of the theory of physics. So he's a very, very influential person because of the passion, It's like for art, for example, the little nun showing us classical paintings, talking about paintings, about art with incredible conviction and passion. That's what's exciting to people. I really love that, more than these sort of dry dissertations on art theory and art history like Robert Hughes, which it's interesting because it's a documentary, so it's watchable, but it's nowhere near as interesting as the little nun, who just exuded passion. And this guy, he had this incredible inquiring mind, and he shared that enjoyment, that passion, with the audience, and and people really, really dug that. It's a dry area, mathematics and physics, and it's not very passionate. You can't really sort of talk about it passion, but he found a way of demonstrating it with an incredible amount of love and passion. So He made you watch, and he made you learn in spite of yourself, which is a great thing. So even the proposition, why is it so, entices you to think about how things work. And even, you should be thinking about things and how they work and not take anything for granted. So, and that goes with everything, every single thing in life. If you you complacent and just take things for granted because society tells you to, then you're robbing yourself of a chance to enjoy life more. Let's get rid of some of these wayward brown lines here. So the lines here are echoes. They're like ripples in a pond. So the two stones have been thrown. His eyes represent that. Very, very intense thought, and it's like the eyebrows, they have a force of inquiry. They are inquiry. So, if you want a picture that illustrates an inquiring mind, you'd be using this one. So to always ask questions. Never take anything for granted. It's a good lesson, especially today. So I'm just clarifying some of these shapes, these glorious wrinkles and folds in here, which are magnificently arranged to tell this man's life story of asking questions and thinking about the answers and thinking about life and about science and about why things move and how things move. And to share that with people, with children all over the world is a great thing. So good for Disney for recognizing that, Man of Science series, which I guess the ABC picked up on and brought him out here so that we can benefit from his enthusiasm. Okay, let's try to get actually before I do that, I'm just going to put some highlights in, but I think before I do that, I'm trying to get a movement happening in the brows that sort of push and pull down, because there's a lot of energy that's pulling up. How do I explain this? Let me get my muscle character. Excuse me. Right. So here we have the human brain. There we have the human face. Underneath the skin. Now the skin tends to soften a lot of these shapes, but basically what's happening here is they've got the incredible lacework of very, very strong taut muscles that drag themselves over the surface of the skull. And they're being driven by the expressions of the eyes. So the eyes, the muscles around the eyes, are incredibly articulate. We're talking about something that is 1,000 times more articulate than you know, our closest physiological cousins, which is the ape or the monkey. So the same number of muscles, same basic structure, but totally different use of those muscles. And because of their use, we have a incredible visual language of a visual language of a range of expressions and meanings of those expressions. So it's really exciting to see all of these little muscles and their use, and also over time the creation of evidence of their use, which what we call wrinkles and age lines. So aging is not just a process of time, or even sun damage is not just a process of time. It's a process of the use of these mechanisms that, unlike a monkey, unlike an ape or a dog or something like that, we use for a very sophisticated level of communication. So in essence, these expressions and muscles and wrinkles are there to inform us about thoughts and feelings. So what we can tell from this expression is that he is incredibly highly intelligent, highly motivated, highly passionate human being, who is incredibly articulate in both his voice and definitely in his face. We can't hear his voice with the picture, but we can imagine the passion in his voice when he's discussing the things that seem to reflect in his expression. So, this is, as I said to you before, like this is a science. We're talking about science programs, which are not generally known for being interesting to kids, and yet kids all over the world, definitely in Australia, were passionate about physics, about science, and all due to his ability to share that passion, that love of the scientific world. That's the dog. Okay, so we're getting into we're just focusing on these areas around the muscles and wrinkles around his eyes, creation of the eyelashes, etc. Just trying to help this expression. I want to keep the expression and make sure that main expression tends to pop and be the most relevant one. It's not just the likeness what we're concerned about, but the feeling of the person. And this is a very intimate activity, drawing, especially drawing faces. And you'll find that yourself. It's kind of it's like reading a lot of things, reading facial clues and what they mean, like expressions and wrinkles and things like that. And also, like, a little bit of body language and what that sort of tells you, because in the drawing process it's almost like you're touching these forms. You're creating a sense of three-dimensional properties. And that's very interesting to think about when you're drawing. So there's quite a lot of things going on in your head. There's a little bit of anatomy. There's a little bit of staging, like a film director. Composition. Trying to feel the moment or feel the emotional impact of the expressions of the elements that you're working with. So there's lots of things going on here. Scale's beautiful when you have a sort of a sense that yep, I can make that work, that will work for me. It's a nice thing when that happens. So it's kind of you've pushed the scale and you're not quite sure, anything can happen. I mean, this is a live drawing. In essence, anything can happen. It might not work, but I have a passion about the process. Really, really interested in this process, and my faith is in that, not in my abilities so much, or my idea. I have no idea really. I do have a little idea, but most of the thought processes are derived from the activity, so I never really know how things will work out until I see it on paper. So that's another thing to consider, actually. May have an issue. Better get some speed happening here. That's what I mean by anything can happen in a live experience. Computer problems can happen. Let's not wish that on us, though. So I'm actually looking very closely at the shape of the ears. Ears and noses, as people get older, they develop individuality. So they're sort of caricatured elements in a way, all of their own. Caricature for me, as I said, is a process of simplification and exaggeration. It's to simplify the shape. So we're trying to sort of create a simple, this is almost like a corn chip shape for the head. And that's going to inform how much you scale things. So you're changing the proportions of things in relation to your choice of shape that you're trying to conform to. There's a lot of I have to work this out. There's a lot of very fine, almost fairy floss hair or cotton candy hair. That's it's very, very kinky and small, not kinky, but tiny crooked waves. There's another descriptor which I won't use for it. I was passionate about science. I loved science when I was a kid. What kid doesn't? And the two areas of science that interested me on TV, and that was like Mr. Wizard, which is an American show, Ask Mr. Wizard. And we used to see that on, I think, one day a week, I think probably, on a show called Super Flying Fun Show. And I really enjoyed that. It was really fun because they had, again, simple experiments. People would rock in and Mr. Wizard would show kids or people how things, you set up little experiments to explain things and to ask questions and get answers of why things work. So here was Julius Sumner Miller was, the more serious example of that television science idea. You can see some of his lectures. If you're not that familiar with him, you can see his lectures on ABC or indeed on YouTube. So he wasn't. We brought him out here. He wasn't an Australian citizen, so he did actually have a university job. In the States. Okay, here we go. Now we've got this white pencil, which is a Prismacolor. It's quite soft. So the brown pencil is also Prismacolor, that's soft, and the black pencil is a polychromo, which is harder, so it can take a little bit more pressure, which is handy. Now the white pencil, of course, does not take a lot of pressure, and indeed you have to use an electric sharpener usually to get a point, because it's so soft they tend to break. See? There you go. This is a perfect example of not taking care of them. They're good tools, but they can be sensitive. And we've got some lovely shapes here with the grizzle or the bone, the soft bone that extends past this area. You've got this continuation of this shape, of this curve that's formed by this softer bone, and that over time, of course, starts, because it's soft bone, it tends to take on shape, because there are soft bones everywhere. Soft bones in the ears, for example, and they'll tend to take on their individual shape as well over time. So the grey paper allows you to build a sculptural drawing. So you're actually drawing light and shadow, not just shadow. And the grey paper, of course, is great for picking up that that highlight. So you can have a good time. It's very fun, actually. Drawing in these textures. You know, it's a great thing to play with, and I really enjoy it quite a lot. You can see that's quite round now. You can also help it with a Posca paint pens as well, which are quite strong, and they'll help. I'll show you that in a sec. Sort of pick up even more contrast for the drawing by the use of some paint pens. And paint pens don't react with the pencil, so that they're not going to affect all of this pencil work. It's just there intended to help increase the contrast a little bit more. Also, we'll put in a it's not there in the photograph, but we're going to look at putting in a side light, which is a kind of sort of a cheat, I guess, to create another level of an artificial way of creating a three-dimensional drawing. Because, you know, objects that are three-dimensional, they have different facets, different faces. Facets is all right, you can use that as a descriptor, and each one of those picks up a light source, and, you know, reflects and things like that. So having that sort of rim light on the side kind of gives you a three-dimensional feel for the subject. Some great sharp little teeth happening in there as well. You know, this is sort of a little, what would you call that? A not a discordant note, but a force in an opposite direction happening around the mouth, which kind of indicates a little bit of shyness, perhaps, which is not uncommon for people in the public eye. You know, sometimes they use public speaking or performance to overcome something like a shyness. It's very common. So sometimes you can see shyness within an expression. So So you can see how familiar I am, and we are as humans, with the human face, and how versatile and flexible the communication is for humans, and how well we are at using that ability. So consider this, another Julius Sumner Miller saying, consider this. Monkeys share the same number of muscles and bones and tendons, etc. on their face as we humans do. But you never see a monkey with the range of expressions that people have. Why is that? Why is it so? It's because physiologically we're similar, but sociologically, or many other ways, we're incredibly different, and almost to the point of bizarreness. In other words, we have like superpowers that no animal possesses. So no animal can communicate visually as well as we do. It's not possible. They just don't do it. I think you need like a certain devoted part of the brain in order to get anywhere close to that level of complexity. They don't have lives that are that complex. We have lives that are complex. And I think that for that reason we have the ability to communicate in a much more complex manner. It's almost like we look like monkeys, but we're not monkeys. We're total opposite. Which is kind of interesting. Where did that come from in the evolutionary process? I mean, you would expect certain attributes to be formed via evolution, but not this. So expressions that come from communicating emotions and thoughts and emotions, feelings and thoughts through the face itself. That's a very, very important thing for humans to do, because it's how we, socially communicate with each other. Of course, I mean, there are no, we watch dramas, we watch theatre, we watch TV, where we have human characters with feelings, emotions and things like that registering on their face, because the actors understand that and they can present that, and that they're believable for us. We're lost in the moment, in the story. Can't get that with dogs. Can't get that with monkeys. I loved the Hathaways when I was a kid, with these chimps and what was that other show? Lance Link, Secret Chimp. Love that stuff. The chimpanzees dressed as spies. It's great stuff, but monkeys are not people. They don't communicate the same way. They're not as sophisticated. I love it when animals pick up, certain traits. Or maybe that's just us projecting anthropomorphic concepts onto animals. You know, is a dog sad? Is a cat sad? Is it, you know, or is it just us presuming that they have that that range of emotions? We don't know. The process of anthropomorphizing the world is it's almost my stock in trade. It's so you get Disney content, films. You know, we're so good at it. Mascots for sport. They're all anthropomorphic expressions, they're humanistic or human-like expressions applied to non-humans, to animals. So I love that, making, like drawing a tiger or something and making him emote like Shere Khan in Jungle Book. Something very powerful and significant, I think. Certainly for the human condition, that we have that ability. Serves, I mean, what's it for? It serves no evolutionary purpose, does it? Does it help you with survival by anthropomorphizing your dogs, giving them imposing human attributes on animals? Doesn't really help us to survive or to communicate. It's just something that is weird. And I think that's the fun aspect. It's fun that it's weird. I like that it's weird. It's good. Some things that don't need to explain. You don't need to say, ask why is it so by all means, but you don't need the answer. Sometimes you just don't. I think it's part of the novelty of expression and communication, the unspoken process of communication. I'm talking about the visual communication that humans do beautifully with their face. So when I do caricature, for example, it becomes like a process of uncovering certain elements of that ability. All right, so here we got a little bit of sculpture in there. We're going to build it a little bit more, I think, with some more white paint. This is these paint markers, paint pens, Poscas are very good. Now, he does have studio lights reflected in his eyes, which I want to try to keep in the caricature. So this is the side light I'm talking about. It's not really an element in the photograph, but I think it would help establish a three-dimensional property. Kind of like that. That's good. Alright, so this is the side light hitting the temples on the side, and it's got the deeper eye wrinkles here because he is indeed a great observer. Here's a beautiful subject. Here's a beautiful subject to work on. Getting a really good vibe from his face, and a lot of positivity, a lot of passion about the subject, certainly, but generally things that we can apply outside of physics or outside of science. So just a zest and a love of inquiry and asking questions, and that's how we learn, but that's more importantly how we live. So it's not so much the thirst for knowledge, certainly, but more of a thirst for understanding. There's some great little lines growing from his hair, which represent the it's almost like these thoughts coming out in hairs. So it's a very strange, incredibly potent concept. These things coming out of his head, thoughts that are flying out of his head, and that's what these hairs, these wayward hairs, sort of represent. Very, very interesting man. So, here we go. So this is a point meter. This is really good for capturing these hairs. These wires that are forming, coming out. That's really good. I like that. Let's try to have to move up the head now. Actually, I'm going to try to get a lip of light here. There's sort of, the shelf of the furrow of the brow there. These wrinkles, they have a way of capturing the light, or reflecting the light. I'm trying to build up that contrast a bit more over there, because I'm following the head, the skull, form of the skull. It's very important to think about that. Also, there's elements of the unseen, which is usually happens with not so much expression. So when the face is more sort of relaxed, there's a visible area like cheekbones, for example, which tend to poke through the tissue a little bit, through the muscles. Just use the brush pen in a moment for that too. But before I do that, I need to get some of these things fine. So I'm going to use the pen. So it's like it's a translucent area through here, which you can see the shape of the head underneath, or through the hair. So this is how, like, they're very, very separated, aren't they, from each other, these hairs. Quite remarkable, sort of a scientific anti-static quality, perhaps. So it could be a very worthwhile thing to capture. Alright, let's try to, we'll use this is a white Posca brush pen, which means that it's going to have a point and also be able to, you can feather the results, which means it can be quite a softer. Actually, you know what I'm missing over on the nose, even though the nose is facing away from us, I think it'd be good to create that bulb, which is usually at the tip. Of people's noses, like so. Yeah, that kind of makes sense to me. So this brush pen will actually make the thing soften a little bit too. A lot of these pen lines, not as soft as the pencil, and I think it might be worthwhile just running over them a little bit here and there. So you have to pump the pen from the back to get the pigment down. Once it hits the brush bristles, works a lot better. So I think this is quite, it's working out quite well. It has a certain amount of, there's a lot of work obviously with the hair. You know what, because there's so much white there, I'm going to try to hit it with a black pen and try to get some more contrast. The black pen I'm going to put into the background, just to make sure that the face sort of becomes more three-dimensional in a very sort of stagey way. So it's kind of popping out, if you will, out of the background itself. So let's try to get that happening. There's a lot of cutting in, obviously, with these little wayward hairs there. I don't want to destroy the character of this, the messiness here. I just want to try to use it in a sensible way to try to get that background shape in the negative space without making the hair look spiky or, you know, change its texture, because I've got a nice sort of, it's wiry, but it's not hard edged. It's very sort of, it has a certain wispiness to it, which is good, and that's going to help with the, you know, obviously relevant textures you want to use. with also the recognition of the person. So yeah, so it's like it's kind of it's forming contrasts. It's using the or creating a negative space, which is a compositional tool to create a sense of contrast and balance. You become more aware of the contours, the outer shape of the forms, and where I've extenuated exaggerated the outlines over here, made the outlines a little bit thicker. I don't want to sort of eat into those outlines with the black background, but I certainly can create the contrasting shape or the contrasting tone behind it. So it's sort of a way of creating again, helping the sculpture a little bit more. So when I say sculpture, it's a sort of a three-dimensional drawing that has form. So it's a drawing that has form that you're able to enhance with the imposition of this negative space. So I used to do that a lot for working in the press, obviously, newspapers, working in black and white. And it's a way of increasing the drama of the illustration. So it's a dramatic imposition. It kind of holds the drawing in place so that the idea is that, when you do a drawing, obviously in the center of the page like this, it tends to have no home. It's sort of floating in space, which is the paper. So this is kind of an anchoring element that imposes composition, because drawing your attention to the relevant details. Which shape is obviously very, very strong. It's the most important detail of drawing. And we've lost the iPad. So let's try to replay. Oops. It's a little bit of a connection issue, I think. Might get lucky. But we've kind of nearly finished this. We're just playing the background now, just applying the background now. So very carefully cutting in. Look at this cutting in business. Brush like this is a zig brush pen. It can have thick and thin properties. It's nice, soft and long bristles. So it gives you that ability. And also for these areas, you can use something that will blend in with the brush pen, and that's using a black marker, which I did have. Seem to have misplaced it. There it is. Look at that. That's another Posca. So these Poscas, they're quite new. They're pretty good. They're significant because they sit on top of the paper. They don't sort of go through like spirit marker, alcohol markers tend to do. This paper is a Strathmore. That's a grey paper. Comes in pad form, and can take a bit of knocking, a bit of watercolor, a little bit. Not too much, of course. It's not really full-on watercolor paper, but it is fairly strong to take a bit of knocking around. I mean, it's a little bit shiny here and there at the moment because it's wet, but when it dries, of course, it'll dry nice and flat, so you wouldn't be able to, it'll be nice and contrasty. So let's have a look at that. I'll show you. That's what's happening. Right, so let's try and get his name in there. I want the right thickness of pen. I think this one will do the job. Should absolutely work for us. So the iPad's gone, but that's all right. PROF. Julius Sumner. Long name. This is the longest name I've done. So it's a really fun caricature. I find he's a fascinating man, and you know, till today, I just saw one of his lectures this morning actually, and you know, I found him as interesting today as I did when I saw him. I first saw him, you know, when I was a little kid in the 60s. So very, very interesting, very, very interesting character. This is the professor, Julius Sumner Miller, and this is the photograph I worked from. He was a great man, a great thinker, great talker, communicator, passionate about physics and about science, and you know, used these sort of toys to explain a lot of physics. So it was very interesting for kids to see how fun science can actually be. Alright, so this is Frantz Kantor saying to you, I will catch you on the flip side. Bye-bye.